All right, everybody, this is Jeff. You are back in Jeff's kitchen, and you got a bonus video coming to you here this month for the Ypsilanti Senior Center. So I want to give you a really easy kind of recipe that you wouldn't normally make, but it's super simple. But I also want to talk to you about vitamin D today and why it's super important when you're talking about COVID-19. So I will link additional information for you in the video notes in the description, so you can look up the different things that I'm talking about, and I'll have an article that I wrote posted there. I will also link the recipe. This is a lentil, potato, and spinach curry. Kind of fun, different. I'm going to show you the easiest way to do it. It's one pan and it doesn't take hardly any time at all, which you're going to see. So let's start out with what we've got here. So I'm starting with, I have these vegetables prepped. I've got potato. Usually do a couple of large potatoes, but I am cooking for a couple of extra people tonight, so I'm going to make a little bit bigger batch than I might normally. The recipe calls for one large carrot. My carrots are a little small, so I've got two medium-sized ones. The recipe calls for one large onion. These are three smaller ones, and then we've got some fresh garlic cloves, and these are already peeled, and they're ready to go into my garlic press. And we've got 3 tablespoons of curry powder. Now I just want to talk to you a little bit about the base of this. I'm going to get these turned on and started here. So what I have in this pan is 5 cups of water, and I use this vegetable bouillon. Really simple. It's better than bouillon. You can use whatever vegetable broth you really want to put in here. That's completely up to you. But I use a vegetable broth. They make low sodium ones as well. You can also make your own vegetable broth. In the pan to the rear here, I have 4 cups of water, and I'm going to cook up some California brown basmati rice. And for the lentils, I'm going to use red lentils today, and I'll tell you why in just a minute, but I wanted to let you know that you can get both the rice and the lentils by the pound on Industrial on the south side of Ann Arbor for super cheap. So lentils and rice aren't expensive anyway, but if you want to buy them in bulk and make bulk batches like I do, that's a great place to go. Your People's Co-op in Ypsilanti also has that. Wanted to talk a minute about curry powder. I buy just a very basic, this is True Goodness organic curry powder. This, I think I got at Walmart for a couple of bucks. It doesn't really matter what kind of curry powder you use. Most curry powders are not very spicy. This is pretty moderate. Got just a little tiny bit of a bite to it, but if you like things spicy, you can always add cayenne pepper or red pepper flakes. So in this particular recipe, I use 3 tablespoons of curry powder, and that is already measured out. So let's get started. This only takes maybe a little over a half an hour to make fully. And you start, of course, by boiling your water. Now I'm going to note on the lentils in the recipe, you can use brown or green lentils as well. And the brown and green lentils do take a little longer to cook. So what I would recommend with those is that you start those out for about 20 minutes before you add the other ingredients. And when I say one pan, everything for the lentil curry is going in here. And then, of course, I'm going to put mine on brown rice. So I've got the pot of brown rice back there and ready to go. If you watched the last video on chili, you saw how I cut onions to kind of minimize cutting yourself. And basically you first cut that onion in half, lay it down. Now if you want to do it fancy like the flour, you can go like this. And what happens when you do it this way is the onion stays together, and then you can go this way and dice it. Come back here on that last little piece that you didn't cut all the way through, cut it up. I'll show you again. And the reason that I always cut that onion in half is to have it not slip, because I have cut my fingers pretty badly by having it slip. When you cut things on the round like this, you run the risk of cutting it, and most people are holding an onion like so, so when they slip, that'll go right into their little pinky, and that's happened to me, and it's not fun, let me tell you. And especially when you're cutting onions, because then the onion juice burns. So I've got this vegetable broth started. We're going to get it to a boil. I'm going to add my onions and the garlic. What do we do with the garlic? I'll get the garlic in a second. Oh, it looks like I just threw it right in, didn't I? Ha, ha. Pause this for. Okay, so now we've got the onion ready to go, or the garlic ready to go here. I'm going to use my garlic press. Nice thing about a garlic press, you don't have to finely dice it or mince it. You can use pre-minced garlic that you find in the jar in your produce section. That works pretty well as well. If you really wanted to not do fresh garlic on this recipe, you can use garlic powder. And I personally prefer a granulated garlic. It just seems to be a little bit more robust. And then from the last video and the chili video, one of the things I mentioned about a garlic press is these little holes tend to get the garlic stuck. That's why you see me scrape it off of there. But you can come back through like this to get it out. And it's best if you just rinse that off. And if you rinse that off right away, you don't have the issue of the garlic sticking on it, and it just makes it that much easier to clean up. So while we're waiting on this to boil, I'm going to go ahead and quickly cut my carrot. Now this particular dish, I had mentioned last time we'll talk about type 2 diabetes, and people worry about simple carbs and diabetes, and you should. It does spike your blood sugar a little bit, but the more important thing to be concerned about with type 2 diabetes is your fat intake. And the higher the fiber and the lower the fat you go, the easier it is to get off those medications that have deleterious side effects. So one of the nice things about beans and lentils in particular is that it's a slow burning food, so they would consider it low glycemic index, and so you don't get those blood sugar spikes, and it tends to even out your blood sugar for longer periods of time. Even if you eat that at night, they can show that your HbA1c in the morning is in pretty good shape, despite the fact that you may have even eaten late or had some high carbohydrate meal. So for the purpose of today, I'm using red lentils. The reason for that, you'll see that they cook up very fast. To be completely done, it takes maybe 25 minutes if you want to get them to that little bit of a mushy consistency. So I'm going to bring this to a boil. I'm going to let it simmer about 10 minutes, and then I literally throw everything else in to the pot, the potatoes, the carrot, the curry powder, and a couple of cups of fresh spinach. You just mix it all in, and let it simmer for about 20 minutes. So it's, like I said, it's a pretty easy recipe. All right, I think we got enough potato for this one today here. I want to do a little bit more. You can always add more water if you want to make this a heartier dish. If you want to add a little more lentil or a little more potato, you can add a little bit more vegetable broth. And or if it starts getting too thick, you can add a little water to it. But generally speaking, if you've got 2 large potatoes, 2 cups of lentils, a large carrot and a large onion, you throw your spinach in, that's got some liquid content. The 5 cups of vegetable broth is adequate. Now, one of the things that you'll notice about working with curries, or if you've worked with turmeric, is that the yellow will stain your counter. So I have one dedicated spoon that I use, and you can see it's a little discolored here, and I keep it on a spoon rest so it doesn't discolor the counter. I've got my water for my rice just about ready. Now this is brown basmati. It's going to take a good 30 minutes. You don't need to add oils or butters or anything like that to your foods. Totally unnecessary. In the case of rice and in the case of pasta, you know, we were taught that maybe you should add a little butter or oil to keep it from sticking. But just in the first few minutes when the water is getting rolling, if you just give it a stir a little bit, that rice won't stick together, it won't separate. So I'll stir that again in just a little while when that water is boiling. It's just about there. So I'm going to go ahead and set my kitchen timer for 30 minutes. Yep, I used the back side of that. My hands are clean, no worries. So one of the things with lentils is they do tend to, if you cook it real hot, they do tend to stick on the bottom. So sometimes you've got, depending on how much you have in your pot, you may need to turn it down just a little bit and just let it simmer nice and gently until your potatoes are fully cooked. The potatoes and carrots, if you cube them up, you can see that I've got them fairly small here. The carrot's not real large, and as a result, these will cook up pretty quickly. So about 20 minutes from the time I put it in the pot. Now you can see that this is starting to thicken already, and once I get the other vegetables in there, I may need to add just a little bit of water since I'm doing more potato in this. Now this rice has come to a boil, and just make sure none of that's sticking. I'm going to turn that down and let it simmer with the lid just slightly cracked, and then just let her go. It'll be ready in about 30 minutes. Onions and the garlic always smell so good, and then once you add your curry powder in there, it really just starts to come alive, and it'll make your whole house smell good. So get that curry stirred in, mixed around real good, and now I'm going to go ahead and add the carrots. Oops. And throw in all of the potato. And I can tell here that I'm going to need a little bit of water because I did add extra potato in there. So I use glass jars instead of plastic to get my water from a dispenser. And then you'll see on the recipe that it calls for 2 cups of spinach, so that's basically spinach packed. This is just baby spinach that I buy regularly that you can get at Walmart or Meijer. So I just basically take 2 nice handfuls of this and throw her in. You can stir that in just a little bit, but what will happen is when this starts to boil, now that I put all that cold stuff in, it's going to take a minute. But when this starts to boil, that spinach, of course, will melt down in there, so to speak. It'll wither, and then you can stir it in. So with this recipe, of course, you get your healthy whole grain, which is in the brown rice. You get onions and allium vegetable and garlic, which they know has cancer-fighting properties. You get a good hearty starch, some carrots, you've got some vitamin A, some vitamin C, some potassium, and then we know spinach is loaded with all sorts of nutrients, and you get your greens in. And one of the things that we know about the people that live the longest, the centenarians and the blue zones, is that all of them eat at least a half a cup of beans and a cup of greens every day of all different types. Those beans may be soy, they may be, just black beans. It doesn't really matter. Beans are beans, and lentils fall in that same category. So we've got some very healthy things that are going to go along with this. The people that I'm having for dinner tonight, we're going to do a little Brussels sprout appetizer, which we're going to broil and put a little reduced balsamic and a little pureed sweet potato over the top. We'll broil them till they're crispy, so that'll be a nice appetizer, maybe with some Indian naan bread. But again, this recipe is very simple. Anyone can do this. You don't need to be a pro by any means. Rice is easy to cook. Making a pot of vegetables is easy to cook. You just put the right ingredients together and it comes out very tasty, very good. So while we've got that cooking, I'm going to move my camera up and we'll talk a little bit about vitamin D and COVID-19. So let me just hop over to something here real quick. All right, so I'm going to put this particular thread, if you're a Twitter user, on the notes as well. A couple of months ago, I speculated that possibly part of the reason why you see the mortality rates so high in people with dark skin, and that's African American, it's Indian, it's Spanish people. And then we saw the elderly, especially nursing homes. I'm sure you heard about the many fatalities among nursing homes, and what we saw there has been just horrendous. But there's a really interesting commonality among darker skinned people and those in nursing homes, and that's that they're vitamin D deficient. We know that darker skinned people don't absorb the vitamin C from the sun quite as well as a lighter skinned person. And this has been shown time and time again. It's estimated that approximately 70% of African Americans are vitamin D deficient. And when you look at nursing home patients, the vitamin D deficiency, and the particular reason for that is that they're not getting outside very often. So I want to note here one thing first, and I'm going to say it again and again here, is that you don't need a high dose of vitamin D. You'll hear about people taking 5 and 10,000 units, and I'll tell you that that's just absolutely unnecessary and potentially dangerous. You know, it might create kidney stones and that type of thing. So not a good idea. The absolute upper limit of vitamin D3 is 4,000 international units, and most doctors recommend 800 to 1,000 units. And additional research that I've done and some information that you can find at nutritionfacts.org. Dr. Michael Greger recommends 2,000 international units, especially for those of us that live up in the northern hemisphere, that we're inside all winter. And that's the thing about nursing home patients too. A lot of them just aren't getting outside. They may not be careful about, they may not be getting any supplements. The meals might be lackluster in vitamin D, and then you've got a whole host of the population that isn't getting their vitamin D from dairy because they're lactose intolerant. So you've got a lot of different factors there that come to play, but researchers are discovering that there is a correlation between severe vitamin D deficiency and COVID-19 mortality rates. They've showed that with vitamin D, you can slow the progress of pneumonias. Certainly, and I'll get to this in a minute. Certainly COVID-19, but also Parkinson's disease. One of the things that they noticed in dealing with pneumonias is that high doses of vitamin D, especially when people are deficient, help them recover. And now we actually have a couple of randomized control trials, which is the gold standard in the scientific literature, where they take a group of people and they randomize them to one group having a placebo and the other group having a supplement, and they did high dose of vitamin D, and they were able to reduce their hospitalization time from 26 days down to about 15 days just by increasing vitamin D. There is some evidence that zinc helps to play a role, and for those that are really deficient, that magnesium helps to metabolize the vitamin D. So I would encourage you to look at the data. One of the studies that I found on Science Daily is that the patients with severe deficiency are twice as likely to experience major complications. And you should note that this doesn't mean that it's going to stop you from getting coronavirus. There's nothing that can prevent an infection. When you get infected, you get infected. But vitamin D plays a very important role in our immune systems, and as a result, you don't want to get COVID-19 and be deficient. If you want a chance to fight it naturally, you've got to have your zinc and your vitamin D levels, but especially vitamin D, at least in the non-deficient range, which they're saying is above 30 milliliters. So I will put that data in the notes, and we'll go from there. If you have any questions, you're welcome to send me an email. My email will be in the description. It's ctiexec@gmail.com. You're welcome to reach out to me if you need vitamin D3 supplements. Please let me know. We'll get you taken care of. So very important, and even better, we're going to work on some good food here. So let me show you where we're at. We're just going to slide you over a little bit more. So now you can see that this spinach has kind of wilted down in here. So we're going to give this a stir. I can feel that the lentils are sticking just a little bit on the bottom. That's okay. We'll turn it down just a bit and just let this simmer. I've got about 18 minutes left on the timer, which one of the nice things, if you finish this before the rice, which sometimes happens, or vice versa, you can let it sit, and it's not a big deal. The rice is You can heat up if it happens to get cold. This is a great dish reheated. And this is my absolute favorite recipe for some reason. I'm a potato and lentil fanatic. I love curries. I love Indian food, so it's a good one. But you can see how this is coming along. Just absolutely a beautiful curry that we're making. And you see that just didn't take long at all. I've got the rice going as well. Just a side note on brown basmati rice. Some rices have, just in the way that they're produced, have a little bit of arsenic in it. I know that's scary sounding, but organic, California, and there's some other areas, brown rice, brown basmati rice doesn't have it. White rice is mostly stripped of it, so that's not really a concern. And you know, if you're concerned about it, they just say, you know, eat it once a week, you're fine. Levels aren't small enough. But the brown for California basmati doesn't have the arsenic, so good stuff. So we're gonna put this on here for a minute, and I'm gonna hit pause, and we'll come back to this in just a couple of minutes. Just wanted to make a quick note on this. If you are going to stir this around and you feel it sticking on the bottom, which it'll do, it means, for one, you got the burner up too hot, but if you just take it off the heat, and notice that I am using a non-stick pan, so I'm going to just take it off the heat, and I'm just going to gently move anything off of the bottom. And generally speaking, if it's splashing around, like out of the pan, you probably have it on too hot. So you can see that's coming along nicely. We're waiting for those potatoes to finish, waiting on the rice to finish. It'll be about 5 to 10 minutes. All right, everybody, wanted to show you what we're doing here with the Brussels sprouts. They're cut in half and they're broiling. They're not quite done, but I did get that going while we were waiting on this to cook. We'll let that finish. I also have a little bit of a Mediterranean bread with za'atar on it. And here we go. This is all finished up. So let's take a quick look at the final product. Brown rice is nice. You just want to wait for all of the moisture to absorb in it. And then you can add salt and pepper to taste if you want. You want a little bit of a saltiness to it, or you want a little bit of pepper, a little bit of bite, you can add cayenne pepper. But there you have it. There's your lentil, potato, and spinach curry over brown rice. Hope you enjoyed.